She told me she had 1 year to live. I quit my job, spent all my savings, and dedicated every second to fulfilling her final wishes. I loved her more than anything. Until the day I discovered that her illness was a lie, a cruel performance for a movie role. So, I decided to play along. Instead of confronting her, I planned a miraculous cure, a trip she would never forget, and a revenge that would make her feel, in her own skin, what it's truly like to lose everything. My name is Daniel, and for 365 days, I lived a nightmare disguised as a love story. Beatriz and I had been together for 3 years. She was an aspiring actress, full of life and passion. I was a graphic designer with a promising career. I loved her. Exactly 1 year ago, she came home from the hospital, pale and with red eyes. She handed me a medical report and collapsed into my arms. The diagnosis was a rare and terminal cardiomyopathy. The doctors, according to her, had given her a year, maybe 2 if she was lucky. My world fell apart. The thought of losing her was unbearable. That same day, I made a decision: if her time was limited, I would make it as incredible as possible. I resigned from my job at a large agency to take freelance work from home, so I could spend every moment with her. Together, we made a bucket list. And I dedicated myself to fulfilling it with blind devotion. We spent my savings to see the Northern Lights in Norway. I took out a loan so she could swim with dolphins in the Caribbean. I sold my car so we could rent a country house during the fall, just so she could watch the leaves change color. I cooked for her, took care of her on her bad days, when weakness kept her from getting out of bed. I became her caregiver, her confidant, her safe harbor. Friends and family called me a saint, but to me, it wasn't a sacrifice. It was love. I was exhausted, financially broke, but I believed I was doing the right thing. I was giving her a perfect farewell. The truth was discovered by a stupid accident. Beatriz had an old laptop that kept crashing. One afternoon, while she was taking one of her therapeutic naps, the laptop froze as I was trying to help her organize some files. I had to force a reboot. When the system came back up, instead of the normal screen, a folder of recently accessed files opened. The name of one of the folders caught my eye: Character Research, Clara. Curious, I clicked. What I found made my blood run cold. The folder contained dozens of medical articles on cardiomyopathy, videos of interviews with terminally ill patients, and worst of all, a journal. It wasn't her personal journal. It was an acting journal. I opened the file. The first entry read, Day 1 of immersion as Clara. I need to understand the psychology of fragility. Daniel will be my unwitting scene partner. His genuine reaction to the diagnosis was a good start. He's believable. I scrolled through the digital pages, nausea rising in my throat. She described everything. How she researched the symptoms and faked them. How she used my reactions to refine her performance. The trip to Norway wasn't a last wish, it was field research to feel melancholy. My sacrifices weren't acts of love, they were elements that added veracity to the narrative. The illness wasn't real. It was an audition. A preparation for a role in an independent film she was trying to get. A role of a girl with a terminal illness. I was living a lie. My grief, my fear, my love, it was all just a rehearsal for her. I closed the laptop, my hands shaking so much I could barely control them. The feeling that washed over me wasn't sadness. It was a rage so pure and cold that it felt like it was burning everything inside. The woman lying in our bedroom was not my beloved, dying Beatriz. She was a sociopath, a parasite who had fed on my compassion and drained my life for a selfish whim. My first instinct was to wake her up, confront her, scream until the walls shook. But then, a darker, more insidious idea began to form in my mind. She wanted to act. She wanted total immersion in a role. Fine. I would become the director of her final scene. I didn't confront her. That night, when she woke up, I held her and told her I loved her. I continued the game. But inside, I was already someone else. I began my own plan, my own performance. 2 weeks later, I came home with an expression of restrained euphoria. "Beatriz, my love, you're not going to believe this," I said, showing her fake emails that I had created myself. I contacted an experimental clinic in Switzerland. They're working on a revolutionary treatment, a gene therapy. It's risky, but they saw your case and think you're the perfect candidate. They think they can cure you. Her face contorted into a mixture of emotions. I could see the panic in her eyes. The cure was not part of her script. But she was trapped in her own lie. How could she refuse a chance to live? "But, Daniel, what about the money?" she stammered. "Don't worry," I said. "I'll figure it out. We'll sell whatever we need to. The apartment, the furniture, none of that matters. Only your life matters." She was forced to agree, trying to look emotional and grateful. In the following weeks, I moved with terrifying efficiency. I sold our apartment, which was primarily in my name, and all of our valuable belongings. I put all the money into an offshore account, inaccessible to her. She believed we were raising funds for her salvation. I was, in fact, liquidating our life together and ensuring she would walk away from it with nothing. I created a fake website for the Helvetica Regeneration Clinic, complete with patient testimonials and photos of doctors I took from stock image sites. I created a character, Dr. Lars, with whom I exchanged emails and whom she overheard on speakerphone calls. It was a friend of mine with good voice distortion software. The plan was perfect in its cruelty. The treatment required a phase of acclimatization and pre-procedure isolation in a quiet location, without internet or cell phone access, to minimize stress on the immune system. She, the actress, swallowed it whole. To her, it sounded like a high-class medical drama. Finally, the day of the trip arrived. I rented a car and drove for hours, deeper and deeper into the countryside, into the mountains. "The clinic is very secluded, to ensure patient privacy," I explained. She looked out the window, a little nervous, but still in character as the hopeful patient. We arrived at an isolated cabin, in the middle of nowhere. It was rustic, surrounded by a dense forest. "This is it," I announced. "The clinic's isolation annex." The confusion on Beatriz's face was genuine for the first time in a year. "Here. But, where are the doctors, the nurses?" "They arrive tomorrow to start the preliminary exams, my love," I lied smoothly. "Today is just for you to settle in and relax. Dr. Lars's orders." I took her cell phone. And he was very clear, no external stress. That means no phone, no internet. A total detox. Before she could protest, I turned the device off and put it in my pocket. That night, I made her dinner. We sat in silence, the only light coming from a fireplace. She was visibly uncomfortable, the lack of control making her nervous. The actress was losing control of her stage. She tried to maintain the performance, talking about how anxious and a little scared she was about the treatment. I just nodded along, my heart beating with a cold calm. The night was the longest of my life. I barely slept, replaying what I was about to do. There was no turning back. The next morning, I woke up early. I packed a backpack with a few water bottles, some granola bars, a map, and a small amount of cash. While she was still asleep, I placed the backpack near the door. Then, I went to the bedroom and woke her. "Beatriz," I said, my voice devoid of any warmth. "The acting class is over." She looked at me, drowsy, not understanding. I threw the folder with the printouts of her journal onto the bed. "Character research, Clara," I read aloud. The sleep vanished from her eyes, replaced by pure, absolute terror. She looked at the journal, then at me, and her face crumbled. She knew. "Daniel. I can explain. She started to stammer. No, you can't, I interrupted. But I can. For a year, you used me. You turned my love into a laboratory for your ambition. You made me grieve for someone who was never sick. You broke me, Beatriz. And for what? For a role. For a movie you probably didn't even get. She started to cry, the crocodile tears I knew so well. But this time, they had no effect. I was going to tell you. I swear, she sobbed. After the audition, I was going to end the charade. I don't believe a single word that comes out of your mouth anymore, I said. You wanted a full immersion in the role, didn't you? You wanted to feel what it's like to be a sick person, fragile, with no control over your own life. Well, congratulations. I decided to give you the full experience. I stood up and walked to the door. The clinic doesn't exist. Dr. Lars doesn't exist. And the money, our money, it doesn't exist for you anymore either. It's safe, with me. Her expression shifted from fear to fury. You can't do this. You can't just leave me here. I can and I will, I replied. You wanted to feel what it's like to be isolated. Enjoy the forest. You wanted to know what it's like to have no control. Your life, right now, depends on your ability to walk and find help. You wanted a life or death performance. Here it is. This is your final audition. I pointed to the backpack in the corner. In there is water, food for a day, and enough cash for a bus ticket back to the city. It's more than you left me with. The map shows the trail to the nearest road. It's about a 15-kilometer hike. Beatriz's face was contorted into a mask of hatred and disbelief. You're a monster, she screamed. No, Beatriz, I said, opening the cabin door. I'm your director. And this is the final scene. I'm just giving you the motivation you were looking for. Consider it, a parting gift. I walked out and locked the door from the outside. I could hear her screaming, pounding on the door, but I didn't look back. I got in the car and drove away, the sound of her screams being swallowed by the vastness of the forest. I left her there, not in mortal danger, but completely stripped of everything, her comfort, her control, her lies, and most importantly, her audience. The drive back to the city was silent. I didn't feel happy. I didn't feel triumphant. I felt empty. The revenge didn't bring me the joy I expected, just a sense of finality, of a terribly painful chapter being forcibly closed. In the following days, I executed the rest of the plan. I changed my phone number, closed our joint accounts, and moved to a new apartment in another part of the city. I became a ghost. I don't know how or when Beatriz made it back to the city. I didn't care. I knew she no longer had any power over me. Without my money, without my support, she was just another actress struggling to survive, but now with a real, bitter story to tell. Sometimes, I wonder if I went too far. If my revenge was as cruel as her manipulation. And the answer, honestly, is not clear. What she did was a profound violation of trust and love, a psychological exploitation that left me in tatters. What I did was a calculated response, a brutal, practical lesson in consequences. I started my life over. I went back to design, but this time, working for myself. I opened my own studio. The trauma of that year has marked me, made me more cautious, more cynical. But it also taught me about my own limits and my ability to survive. The revenge didn't heal me. What heals me, day by day, is the work, the creation of something new, and the rediscovery of my own life, a life that is no longer a script written by someone else. She wanted a memorable performance, and I gave her one. I'm sure I became the villain of her story. But in my story, I was the hero who finally learned to save himself.